All right. Let's see. Gonna wait. So okay, I am having guys' end. No, it's not on your guys' end. It's on ours. We have very I think it's all of us. Okay. Okay. This should be working better soon. All right. Looks like the internet might have stabilized. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that? Oh, let's move that. Sorry, I have Facebook on. Let's. Okay, hopefully that does help. Okay. Ow, no. So this does not. Okay. Are we? Stream latency. I can't change the latency. It says good connection. All right. Anybody? Sorry, y'all. Is chat working again? Okay. Let's remove that off of that screen. Oh, yeah. Okay. Is chat working, guys? Trying to see how that works out. My intention is that the chat should be working better. It's supposed to be. I hold on. It seems better now. Okay, good. So my wife is being super helpful and messaging me on Facebook to let me know when things are working and things aren't. Is chat working? Because I can only see my stuff. I'm not seeing you guys. I'm not seeing you guys in the chat. There's so okay. There's a minute delay at least, which is frustrating because I put this thing to the lowest latency possible. So last time I realized that YouTube actually had different tiers of latency. That it's like, oh, we could delay this for anywhere up to like a minute, or we could try to make this as instantaneous as possible. So this time I'm like, oh, cool, the instantaneous as possible option, please. Why is that not the default? Open a stream on my phone if I can. I can't. I'm using the phone to record. Crud. Okay. Copy. It's gonna go to YouTube, and chat works. Okay. Actually, this latency is not bad. Okay. Criminy. All right, criminy, and hell? All right, so after many delays, this seems to be going now. I am going to open up a new window where I could hopefully be able to actually see the chat. Pop out chat. Yay, chat works. Oh my gosh. Okay. No, right now it's supposed to be the slide, and I'm sorry. It's just everything is just crazy. It's just everything is just, you know, as you guys can imagine, this has been a lovely transition for everybody. Let's restore the chat there. Okay, so right now I have it so that it's supposed to be streaming actually the face cam. And so the fact that it's just on the slide is a little frustrating. It's a little not good. Okay. Chat works, but all I see is you frozen. Yeah, wonderful. Okay. Cool. Okay, well, there's my frozen face. Interesting, because on my end, if I were to test this, I actually can see pretty decently, but it could just be my...
There's my frozen face.
Okay, frozen face. So what we gain in decreased... What we gain in increased speed, we lose in video... We lose in the video refresh, I guess. We lose in the ability for me to actually be able to be talking to you. The slide is fine. Your face is frozen. Okay, are you guys hearing me okay? Because if that's the case, then I might just have to just use the slides and limit the face cam, and we'll test the we'll test medium latency next time. So how is the voice coming through? Is that okay? Pop that into the chat so I can get a sense of that. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Hear you great. Okay. Unfortunately, then, that means no doggo cam this time, guys. I'm terribly sorry. If you guys can hear me but you can't see me, that means that dog is not going to be able to come on the screen today, and I apologize. So, okay. Crystal. Okay, good. Audio's working fine. All right, so I can get a sense of the latency because, again, from my test stream, it seems to be working all right. Here's a quick little test just so I can get a sense of how long this is going to take. Marco! Polo. Awesome. Okay, so that's better than last time. That's still probably about 20 to 30 seconds. Okay, so that's better. So I hope that this means that you guys will be able to respond a little more, a little faster. Oh my god, all of you. I love you guys so much. That's fantastic. Okay. Hopefully with the decreased audio latency, this means you actually might be able to ask questions a little more frequently, and I might be able to stop and ask questions to the class a little more frequently. So that's the hope, that's the intention. So let's get into what we're talking about today. Campaigns. So next stream, I'm also going to be testing to see if I can play the song again. So, but you can imagine for this one, the song for this one is that, you know, that old war song. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Because a lot of people were wondering whether or not campaigns are good for anything, at least in terms of political participation, getting people to turn out and getting people to turn out for your candidate intentionally. So there's some debate, but we're going to talk about this. Before we talk about that, though, we have some housekeeping. We have some housekeeping things to go over. You guys might have gotten the email from Fuchs, from President Fuchs, that we are now online for the entirety of the rest of the semester. I get the information as soon as you guys do because I'm a member of both the student listserv as well as the faculty listserv. So I can promise you both of those things, we get updates within a minute of each other. So as soon as you guys know, I know. If I happen to hear any rumblings of anything, I'll be sure to let you guys know, but at the moment, I get the information as soon as you guys do. So we're now online for the rest of the semester. And that causes a couple of things to be put into effect, at least in terms of, oh wow, we're still on the main, are we still on the main campaign screen? Wow, that is a hell of a visual lag. How long of a visual lag are we talking about here? Because that kind of also defeats the point of PowerPoint presentations, if you guys can't actually see me updating the slide. Audible question mark here. Okay, stream settings. Enable DVR. Okay, so wow, that is one hell of a visual latent. That is one hell of a latency in terms of the visuals. You see housekeeping. You have the housekeeping screen. Okay, you see the slide updating. All right, cool. I guess it's just slow on my end. Your slide went well with you on my side. Okay, so it's just on my preview. That's good to know. So I'm relying on all of you guys then to keep me knowing, because my preview is no bueno. Okay, so yeah, so we're now on. Don't touch anything. All right, thank you, Haley. So yes, all right. I'll keep on keeping on then. All right, so we're online for the rest of the semester. I'll let you guys know as soon as I hear anything. Summer should be the case. Fall should still be on. Summer should still be on. For those of you guys who are graduating this spring, obviously you guys probably heard by now that the commencement is. I don't think they're actually doing a live commencement, and for that I sorry to hear that. It's a wonderful experience. But it does not in any way rob you guys of the accomplishment that you guys have done with your time here at UF and your overall collegiate career. You have accomplished a lot. Going across the stage, having the ceremony is obviously nice. It's obviously important. It's a time for you to be able to celebrate with your family about this. But in no way should you take that as any kind of diminishment of your accomplishments. You guys have done a hell of a good job already. So and this is just the first of many, or the next of many steps yet to come. So I hope you're not too discouraged with this. Did want to clarify on extra credit, or the quote-unquote extra credit assignment. So many people are recognizing that this is, many instructors across different universities, because we all talk on Twitter and Facebook, because we have no lives, so we talk about instruction. Now, we pass a lot of tips, because this is a very trying time for everyone involved. We're all just trying to figure out the best way to do well by you guys. So the University of Florida, unlike some other institutions, not all others, but some institutions, are insistent that we keep the same standards, that we keep everything as if, like I said in the email, we just magically happen to now be online versus now being forced to go online for the sake of a global pandemic. And because online learning is an art form in and of itself. In order to be good at online learning, you have to have a whole different kind of pedagogical skill set than you do to be for in-person stuff. So to say that we've shifted online is kind of like it's a bit inaccurate to say, because really we've just kind of we've emergency migrated online is really what we've done. So they don't want me to change the grading scale. Basically. So like they don't want me to change the course outcomes. They don't want me to change the course expectations. They just want me to pretend that this is how it's always been, and that the standards shouldn't be amenable to the fact that many of you guys don't have the most stable of internet connections. Many of you guys don't have the time you might be caring for relatives. You might be caring for yourself. You might be stressed and anxious at the fact that this is a once in a generation kind of thing, and that for some reason, perhaps maybe a class on political participation may not be the foremost concern in your mind. They want me to pretend that none of that is the case. And you probably guess by my inflection, because unfortunately you can't tell by my face, I'm not a huge fan of that. But my hands are, from a technical position, tied. So like, for instance, I can't give you guys too much slack in terms of things from their end, but This is also a great opportunity to talk about, how in terms of law enforcement in the United States, you have the laws, but then you also have the police and everyone else like that have norms of enforcement, right? So you can think of the syllabus as the laws and contract dictating and guiding this class. Ultimately, though, the law and the rules of enforcement do kind of fall on me, so I have a lot more discretion. So if I'm not perchance allowed or specifically allowed to change the grading scale so that a 90 is now an A rather than 93, to have at least some sort of acknowledgement that this is going to be a difficult transition, or to change it so that there is no other, to just change the grading scale a little bit to be amenable to this. If I can't do that, in theory, one could accomplish the same aim, purely hypothetically, obviously. One could accomplish the same thing by having an assignment that is, perhaps a smidge easy, perhaps disproportionately weighted compared to the rest of the work that you guys are doing and have done so far. But if it just so happens to have the same effect of, curbing the grade and other things like that, I assure you, totally a mathematical coincidence. It is just purely coincidental, right? That it would happen to accomplish the same aims that I would want to do, but I am precluded from doing based upon the university's instructions. The fact that it happens to satisfy my own personal desire that is being stymied by red tape and callousness. Now, that's, again, purely coincidental. All right, so extra credit assignment is worth, I want to say 430 points is what ultimately ended up. Hypothetically, I think this was a 5-star review. I appreciate that. So I think it's about 430 points, and that it's literally just send me a picture of a dinosaur through email. That's it. Send me your favorite dinosaur picture. Could be the same freaking dinosaur picture. I do not discriminate against dinosaur pictures. So just send me another picture of a dinosaur. Really, just that's all you need for that point. If you don't do that assignment, so if you do that assignment, the denominator on your grading scale will shift from being out of 1,000 points to being out of 1,430, right? If for some reason you can't do that assignment, you aren't able to do that assignment, that doesn't mean that you've just bombed a 430 point assignment. It just means that you're going to still be graded on the 1,000 point scale. Email me if for some reason you're having issues connecting to email. That'd be kind of difficult. Email me if you have issues connecting to the internet. Email me if there's some reason that you're not able to find a picture of a dinosaur. We'll make this work. Okay, again, my interest here at this point in the semester is purely pedagogical, right? My interest is in helping you guys gain and continue to gain the expertise and provide some sort of sense of normalcy for those who want to take advantage of that, right? I'm not particularly interested in stopping anybody's career. Can it be the dino from the work of art that is The Land Before Time? Abso-fucking-lutely it can. Yes, it absolutely can. All right. Grading scales in general. When is it due by? End of the semester. Dinosaur can be in by the end of the semester. Whenever, as long as it's in before grades are due. So as long as that's the case, you can literally just email it now, though. It's just, but yeah, end of the semester. It doesn't really matter. Dinosaur picture, you can get it from Pinterest, Instagram, wherever. I honestly just don't care. Okay, grading scales in general. Good question though, Madeline. So grading scales in general. Some professors are shifting to a kind of a pass-fail system. My hands are tied because I can't technically do that for a couple of reasons. One, because of university instruction. Two, because I'm technically a supervised, air quote, instructor and not actually a full instructor of the course. And so my ability to be able to change things on the fly are further limited. But even if that was the case, I don't know if I would necessarily want to go to the pass-fail format. And it's not because I'm trying to sit here like, this is a class, you guys... No, whatever. It's because I know a lot of you guys have aspirations beyond this course, and that taking that pass-fails are weighted differently in GPAs, right? And some of you guys' aspirations, like law school, grad school, things like that, those aspirations, could be affected by my decision to give you a pass-fail grade, right? and possibly detrimentally so if you're doing especially well in this class and you didn't do well in a previous class. Having this boost here will be able to help you. And me shifting it to a pass-fail might end up causing that might hinder your intended career progression. So send you a dyno pick for extra credit. Yes, sir. Send me a dyno pick for extra credit. So we're keeping the grading scale as like a B, C scale. I'm tempted to make everything be like A, then you have B plus, C plus, and da because I don't think you can really accurately grade gradations in this kind of environment as well as you could in the face-to-face environment. But I'm still debating that, teasing over that. We're keeping the A-B scale. We're not going to a pass-fail scale, but I'm doing that because I want to make sure that for those of you, and it's a lot of you who are looking at things beyond this, that this course is able to continue to help you with that you wouldn't get accidentally dinged for having it be a pass-fail system. If you have higher aspirations and you feel like the grade in this class as it stands right now is an issue for that, email me. We're going to try to make this work. Okay. Weighing attendance. Okay. So let's talk about what we're talking about today. And today we're talking about turnout. Turnout and campaigns election. So a lot of us have probably heard with fairly decent amount of accuracy that turnout in the United States in terms of election turnout isn't what we would call the best, right? So this is a chart that's produced by Dr. Michael McDonald, who actually is a professor here at the university. He specializes, one of the things he specializes in besides gerrymandering and things like that, and redistricting, he specializes in turnout and in historical turnout rates in the United States. He's actually, when you hear like, oh, X% of the United States turned out, he's the person who's responsible for that in terms of the elections, and has been probably for the better part of a couple decades. So this is off of his website, where he looks at rates of turnout over time, right? So we have presidential elections, we have midterm elections, and in general, you can see, with the exception to you had for a little while, you had midterm elections that were higher than presidential elections, and that made sense in the original conceptualization of the Constitution. It's also enshrined in why you see it listed as the first branch in the Constitution. The legislature was seen as more important than the president, and thus more people participated in their legislative elections rather than those for the president. Up until you started getting, near towards the Civil War, that's when you got to that party era. That's when things started to become more nationalized. That's where the presidency started to have higher stakes, and that's when people started to participate more in that. But in general, we see higher rates in the 1850s, and then things like that. We start to shift down into the 1900s, and we've kind of stayed oscillating around the 60% of eligible voters around that point in terms of presidential elections, with the exception of 2018. We see substantially lower. 2018 was very high turnout. President Trump has managed to be very, very polarizing, as I'm sure all of you guys know, right? So that what that means in this case is not just Democrats who are angry about him turning out; it's Republicans who are enthusiastic about him who are turning out. And so he inspires a lot of general turnout, and he did in 2018. So we have this, and we have a few reasons for this, right? So one, when you look at the range, 1789 going up to further, and you have like this range over here, and you see much far higher turnout. Keep in mind who was allowed to turn out. The denominator was far lower, right? So we didn't have national female suffrage up until the turn of the 20th century, early 20th century. Some states did allow women to vote. In fact, some of the states and territories actually used that as a technique to try to get women to come out and migrate into the territories. I think it was Wyoming, if somebody wants to fact check me on that, who was the first to actually have women's suffrage as a voting women's suffrage. And the reason they did this is because so many men were going into the territory that they needed women for population sustainability. So they're trying to find a way to be able to encourage women to come out to the territory, and so they made it so that they could vote, being like, hey, you'll be recognized as a active participant and full citizen of this place. Frickin' shocker. And the frickin' shocker is that it worked. Well, not that it worked. The frickin' shocker is, shocker, guys, women are people, right? Obvious, at the time, just Christ. But it's no surprise that worked, right? That it managed to get women to go out to the area. managed to get women to turn out, and so other states started experimenting with this as well, and getting female turnout. But up until this point, the denominator was smaller because of female turnout, but it also recognized around this time is the time of like Jim Crow and some massive ethnic stereotyping in addition to Jim Crow. So who was allowed to participate in these elections? Largely white males, and up until about here in 1828, it would be landowning, or 1824, 1828, wealthy landowning white males. So the fact that these rates are generally higher than what we see around in here, just keep that in mind, that it's definitely skewed. And it's also skewed because historical data and all those other sorts of things are harder to come by, and it's far more dubious in nature. But then you have around here, and you have this dip. And so it took a little bit of time because if you think about this, imagine that you have women nationally across the United States. So again, we're allowed to vote in some states, but not in all states. And they grew up in a society that didn't encourage them to participate. That didn't kind of inculcate participatory norms. And then all of a sudden they're given that opportunity. Younger women were probably more likely to take it up and things like that because they hadn't learned over the course of their entire lives that wasn't expected of them. But older women, right, that wasn't something that necessarily would stick with all of them. Again, we're talking about averages and things like that. So it took a good amount of time before rates started to pick up after the move to have equal suffrage. And then you go here where it became right after Vietnam, I want to say 72, where it made it so that 18-year-olds could vote, and we had this dip again, and people expected to see a general trend. And then for a while we were worrying that there wouldn't be one, but it's possible that we're seeing one, right? When we're seeing this uptick here, that we're starting to kind of go back to normalized levels around 60% of turnout for presidential elections. So internationally, this doesn't look great. Internationally, it's not. We don't exactly have high turnout in the United States if you look on this. So let's go down to where we are. We are over here, right? So in terms of our voting age population, right, about 50%. In terms of percentage of registered voters, it's far higher. But you have to keep in mind, right, that it's this two-stage game that you have to get out and register. And what does it even mean to be registered? You have to first be eligible, which is what the previous slide was looking at, was the voter eligible population, right? Because before the last election in Florida and before mid 2010s, a number of states made it so that felons could not be registered to vote. Felons could not vote. Going into the early 20th century and still on into today, people who were declared mentally incompetent could be precluded from voting. It happens far less frequently now, but it certainly happened a lot more in the turn of the 20th century. So when you're looking at in terms of the rates of our participation as a nation for voting age, we're pretty bottom of the pack. We internationally, we do not look good compared to other industrialized democracies, and this is coming from Pew. So we don't exactly look very good. So a lot of people kind of wonder and worry and all the other sorts of things, and for good reason, right? It's obviously important for a democracy and for a democratic republic to have people participate in the things that make it that system, right? To have people be able to participate in elections is kind of a big point of having a system based upon elections. So this is where people get, again, wringing their hands and things like that about turnout and participation here in the United States. But this is just one part of the participation picture. Again, we talked about it in the very, very beginning of class. What is political participation? What is political behavior? A lot of things are political behavior. And in a lot of different ways, the United States is actually far better, right? And I couldn't think of anything better than this, right? Than the network of shopping angels that a lot of younger people are joining to be able to help bring food to elderly neighbors who otherwise can't go out because of the social distancing and self-quarantining that is becoming due to Corona, right? So there's that famous Mr. Rogers quote, right? Look for the helpers. You guys probably remember a few years ago the Boston Marathon bombing, which is really when this quote first started kind of coming to me. And the reason I bring it up is because, one, as a marathon runner, as a lifelong runner, that being a member of that community, that hits me hard. But second, that actually happened on my birthday, and it was horrible, heartbreaking, and disheartening and saddening until you see it, after the explosions, right? People running into it, and that's where you have that quote that really, I know it just kind of hit me, and it stayed with me, and I hope it stays with you too after this experience, right? Because world seems bad, world seems scary, and in many respects it's not perfect, and it can be scary and uncertain and chaotic. But look for the helpers. You know, don't look for the people who are, buying all the hand sanitizer and then trying to price gouge it, right? Like that dude from Tennessee who fortunately got arrested and fined for that sort of behavior. Look for the people instead who like worked at a brewery in Tennessee. I want to say it was Tennessee, who recognized the fact that because they're producing things of such high alcohol content that they actually could make sanitizer for other people, right? There are lots of helpers in the world, right? In the United States, in terms of its volunteering, in terms of its in terms of helpfulness in civic engagement, we're actually just about better than anybody else. There are only 3 countries in the world that outcompete us on on international volunteer indices, and that's Indonesia, that's Australia, and that's New Zealand. We are number 4, and even then, it's super, super close. In years past, 70s and 80s, we were actually number 1 in terms of volunteerism. And a big reason for that is actually, it varies between countries, but specifically in the United States, goosebumps. Specifically in the United States, a big reason why our participation in terms of civic engagement is so high is because of the religiosity in the United States. A lot of people also compare our religiosity to other locations, and this made me feel better. I'm glad that it made you guys feel better. Again, look for the helpers, and I know a lot of you guys are in fact the helpers. So take pride in your own actions and the actions of your peers. You guys, we're gonna be okay. We will persevere. All right. So we rank very, very high up on that. And part of that is because when you compare to other nations across the world, we are far more religious, and it's not necessarily that like religious doctrine, which I mean several religious doctrines obviously do emphasize community work and acts of service, but the other thing is that it's not just in terms of like it's not a moralizing thing. It's not the fact that we're somehow more moral because we're more religious in this country. No, what it is that churches offer, again, that opportunity for social connection, social networking, and social capital, and those being such a prominent venue and prominent nexus of participation here in the United States means that people go there and they have additional opportunities for charitable giving, additional opportunities for charitable actions, right? Churches just are in general a good place for those kinds of activities, and so the fact that we as Americans on average go to church more frequently than those in other countries means that on average it contributes to our being more likely to participate. So let's pivot away from that and kind of talk about campaigns, because common sense kind of dictates that a lot of the political activity that we have, right, a lot of the political activity that we do is driven by campaigns, and that campaigns are good at getting particular outcomes, right? That the campaigns are good at getting people to turn out, and campaigns are good at getting people to turn out specifically for somebody else, right, or for your preferred candidate. As always, common sense is contested, right? In addition to religion, does it have... Oh, hold on. We have a question from Jeffrey. In addition to religion, does it have anything to do with our attitude towards individualism and anti-government, and that we are very individual and don't want bigger government? Generally speaking, we take it upon ourselves to help others when in other countries, Europe, for example, they rely on the government to fix more. I'm not sure. That's an excellent question. I think that... I cannot think of any studies off the top of my head that have really looked at individualism as a cause or as a contributing mechanism for this is really a good question. This is making me dig. As a contributing mechanism for why we tend to do more. But I think maybe not on an individual level, but in terms of how it's baked into our culture, I think that this gets at something that, and not just in terms of our culture, but in terms of kind of like the culture mixed with how we talk about government and how we talk about things in this country. We are very skeptical of it as we tend to be more skeptical towards government than many other industrialized countries. For better or worse. Some senses it's better, some senses it's worse. It's everything's a double-edged sword. Because my thought is how we don't trust the government, so we do it ourselves. Yeah, I think that I don't necessarily think like on an individual level that's the case. I think that what might be happening, I think there's been some historical pieces that I've read that kind of point to this, that because we don't trust government from a cultural standpoint, government doesn't tend to encroach into certain areas, and so other organizations like churches and like community organizations stepped in to fill what they perceive to be a gap, right? And so I would say that, that if the connection is there that you're suggesting, and I'm not, and I think that there's definitely something to this. Again, this is an excellent question. I think that it's more of a structural thing, and it's on a structural level rather than on an individual level, right? That it's the fact that structurally we don't tend to trust government, so structurally other entities came in to take over some of the things that they saw that other countries' government would take care of. So I think it would be more of a structural thing rather than an individual thing. But yeah, good question. So going shifting back to where we were over here onto the screen. Common sense is contested in terms of the ability to actually get these sorts of outcomes, right? So, because we have to remember that campaigns are playing two games, right? Because when we talk about campaigning, we kind of talk about it in. Oh, thanks. Yeah, of course. I'm glad that it's working fast enough that you guys can ask questions and I can react fast enough instead of like you ask a question, it being a minute and then nothing. So yeah, if you guys have any questions throughout this is a big reason why I try to decrease the latency. Pop them into the chat. Please just, if you have any kind of questions or comments and things like that as we're going along, pop them down in there. So I hope this will allow me to be able to react faster. So they have the two games, and a lot of people tend to think of this as the persuasion game, and we see this kind of in the rhetoric now in terms of like, oh, the policy positions that Bernie Sanders would be advocating versus Joe Biden would be advocating and how those match up with people. We saw this baked into the Downsian framework that we talked about way in the beginning of the class, right? That bimodal distribution about how in the policy space, parties are going to go towards where most people are, and that they're mapping based off of proximity to policy preferences. And so that sense is like, oh, we're trying to persuade people to come over to our side. But as we've talked about over the last few weeks, that doesn't really seem to hold up because we've talked about identity, right? We've talked about other things. We've talked about participation due to social groups and things that are far less malleable than simple persuasive techniques, right? We're talking about things that are really baked into people, like such as their political identities. So it can't all be a persuasion game. In fact, when you look at in terms of the return on investment for persuasive techniques, they tend to be lower than turnout techniques. But that does not mean that persuasion isn't important. A lot of people think that campaigns are relatively ineffective. Right? You saw that from the Vox article and things like that. Speaking of, actually, between the two articles, the Washington Post and the Vox article, did you guys notice anything interesting about them? I mean, maybe not interesting. Well, yeah, maybe interesting about them. Like, yeah, I'm just gonna keep that question and stop telling to you guys. Notice anything interesting about the two articles? Give you guys some time to write as well as to think about it. Also gives me some time to drink some coffee because Rose was nice last night, and she let us get. I think my wife got a couple hours, here and there. I got I want to say like maybe 3 a course a night. Okay, Chandler. In regards to so yeah, this is difficult for me to be able to articulate this question without, one, being too vague, and two, just giving away the goose. So I'm just going to go ahead and give away the goose. They're talking about the same article, right? They're talking about the same research. So if you notice in the Vox piece, they reference research, and then the Washington Post piece, that is the researchers, right? So you actually have two relatively different takes on the exact same thing. And the reason I brought that up is because and the reason I had you guys read both of those things is because I kind of wanted to bring out a point about how research is interpreted in the press, right? Once researchers put something out into the world, they kind of lose a big amount of the interpretation of their pieces, right? So it's kind of like with any kind of text or any kind of artwork or anything else like that. In that sense, science is kind of more art than science. Now, once you put something into the world is just as imperative or just as important in how that ultimately gets interpreted. So you have the Vox piece, which is like, oh, it's all bad. This isn't very good. Look at these experiments. Look at this aggregate results. And yeah, you can kind of find some effects someplace, but really, campaigns aren't all that important. Versus their piece in the Washington Post, where they're saying, well, actually, it can be very important. It's all context dependent, right? And I'm not saying one is a worse or better interpretation. I'm just saying that there are different interpretations, but the fact that there are different interpretations is basically the whole game when you play when you look at media reports on social science research, and to a lesser extent STEM research as well. So just when you can, try to find either the author's own work on the topic, how they explain it themselves, or how or if you can actually read the article yourselves. Because that way you can see how people are interpreting it, but you can also see the source material, and then from there you can kind of position yourselves relative to both and kind of get a sense of what the whole thing is actually trying to say. But going back to this, right, you have the turnout game, you have the persuasion game, and the article for Vox is dealing with the persuasion game, because a lot of people think that we talk about campaigns in terms of persuasion, in terms of getting people into this coalition and getting people to vote for us, but again, it's contested to the extent of how well we're actually able to do that. So, how effective are they, right? That's kind of what we're going to be wrapping up here for today, is in how effective they are at these particular games. So, how effective are they at game one, at actually causing turnout? Pretty damn effective, right? But it does depend on what actions they're doing and in what context, right? So, we know that they can inspire political participation because, one, some actions are entirely campaign dependent. It doesn't make much sense to ask people, oh, did you donate to a political campaign when there isn't a campaign happening, right? Like asking somebody in 2019, like, oh, did you donate to a your local like a local state campaign or campaign for governor? And you'd be like, no, that happened last year, right? So some of these things are entirely contextually dependent on actually there being a campaign, and those include formal things or things that political scientists have focused a lot more on, like putting on buttons and bumper stickers, signs, and calling people, and a whole bunch of other things like that. We know that it can increase activities in those domains, not just in regards to voting, so it can increase participation in general, but we also know that it can increase certain kinds of participation that aren't great for democracies, and not even just not great, like bad, very, very bad. And we'll talk about this when we get into violence, that actually research has found across contexts that political violence increases in proximity to elections, right? So it's not even just so elections are good because elections are good besides the normative thing. Elections are good at informing people. People are never more. What is the most effective technique in terms of this? Good question. Depends on what you mean by effective. But that's a good question, Haley. Registering is probably the most effective if you're thinking in terms of what's most effective across multiple kinds of electoral contexts, right? So registering people will get people to turn out in presidential elections, in midterm elections, in local elections. We know that. So we know that in terms of across multiple contexts, registering people is probably the most effective here. But we know that going door to door is more effective in local races, right? As opposed to presidential races by a lot. We know that text messaging is similar things like that. So we know that in some contests it matters. So in presidential elections, a mailer could be more effective than in other instances, right? So it does kind of depend on things, yeah. So we know that as we'll talk about in the violence lectures when we get to them, that elections are good at stimulating activity. I feel like they all work in their own ways. Yeah, exactly. Yes, Ethan. Yeah. So it's different mechanisms are happening here. Yes. So registering people both informs them and then also gives them kind of a sense of investment a little bit into that, but also a sense of efficacy that they can be involved in this process. Kind of gives them a little nudge because that's really the big hurdle. If we know that we know that if people are registered, they're probably going to vote like 80% of the time, 90% of the time. Whereas going door to door, it does it in a different way, right? That's kind of really tapping into that community aspect, that those letters we talked about a little while ago, those kinds of things. Like, that's why people who work on campaigns try to have individuals who are from the neighborhoods go out and actually do the knocking on the doors, or at least from that general area, or like look like they're from that general area, or look and act like they're from that general area, because they're trying to tap into that social connection and do that. The text messaging could just be informational and other things, but yeah, 100%. They have different mechanisms that are bringing about these effects. So it's not even just in terms of context of when they're effective, but context of how they're effective, 100%. So that's we have different things are better than others. So the ones that are bolded here are things that work best or better, right? There are lots of different techniques. Campaigners are very, very creative people, and they have loads of ways that they can be able to try to inspire people to turn out. But there are other things that really don't do as well. So like emails don't really get as much activity. And email doesn't get as much in terms of voting. Email is all right in terms of getting people to donate, but that's why there's a multi-million-dollar industry in A/B testing, like looking for whether or not like the font size of an email will get people to donate even a little bit more than, things like that, like testing one kind of font versus another, and then like thousands upon thousands upon thousands of emails to try to find those little nudges that get just a little bit more money. So we know, but that's why there's a $1 million industry for those sorts of things, because those sorts of techniques don't do as well. So they really got to optimize. They really got to fight for every single cent they can get. Advocacy mailers, so like mailers from candidates, can work up to a certain extent. It is kind of a diminishing return sort of thing. So you have one or two mailers, three mailers are going to be, you probably will be more active, more likely to vote because you're now informed, you're now aware of the issues, of those sorts of things. But if you get to like 7, 8, 9, 10, people can kind of burn out. And it's not necessarily that the research doesn't show definitively that there's like it starts to trend down at any point. It's just it no longer goes up. So at some point but at some point it could cause a backlash in terms of whether or not you're voting for that particular candidate, but not necessarily a backlash in terms of whether or not you vote. And that gets us into the persuasion thing. I didn't put any of these because all of these would ultimately be kind of like in italics, because none of them are exactly great. And this goes into the readings and the things that we were talking about before, right? How effective are they? They're, in terms of persuasion, that second game 2. Generally less, but it's still important. It's better for contests that are more local. It's better for contests that are less partisan, and that makes sense, right? Because if you have that party ID, if you see, like when we talked about last week, was like you go up to the door, you see the woman with the 2 kids. Recently Bernie, hold on one second. Ethan commented, recently Bernie's campaign went crazy on texting everyone, and obviously to his supporters it works, but to me I heard so many people speak negative and be annoyed about his campaign doing that. Yeah, I mean, exactly. You could have a backlash from that sort of thing. I don't know if that necessarily was going to. You kind of hit the nail on the head already when you said it works very well to his supporters because oh yeah, this is great. So it might encourage his supporters to turn out, but the people who it would be discouraging to are probably already the kinds of people who wouldn't already vote for him. But I will actually point out to this, and if anybody's working on any of these campaigns in the future, for one, I'm available as a consultant. Just keep that. Actually, not available as a consultant. Raising an infant. But more importantly, it's super cost and inefficient what they did, right? Like I mentioned before, we have the Florida voter file. You can buy it for $5. You can know who's eligible and not eligible to vote, right? So like if I were to go out and voted yesterday, which I didn't out of concerns over COVID, and the reason I didn't, right, is because I'm an independent, right? I had only the local elections that I could have voted in. That was it. But I got like texts out the wazoo, right? Those texts were compared to a reverse Uno card. I mean, again, I don't think it's necessarily they weren't as detrimental. I don't think that necessarily hurt Sanders. I think probably they actually increased his turnout in the long run because, again, now you're energizing his base. But in terms of the second game, right, persuasion, it really didn't do all that much because they weren't picking persuadable individuals. There's a whole science to micro-targeting, to like combing consumer data and Facebook data, social media data, and as well as turnout records, and finding the individuals who are the most likely to be persuaded to turn out. This is down. They're working on this to get it down to a fine science. It's not perfect, obviously, but you can maximize your probabilities if you do this sort of micro-targeting approach using big data. And but they didn't do that, right? They just did kind of a mass mailer kind of thing. Within this case, kind of a mass texter and this sort of things. And they would send it to registered Republicans. They would send it to registered independents who couldn't even vote for Bernie if they wanted to. And they would send it to registered independents past the date that independents could change their party affiliation in Florida. So it was just not a very cost-effective thing. Micro-targeting is getting harder. Yes, true, it is getting more difficult. Well, I mean, is it? I don't know. What do you kind of mean by that? I'll give you a second to kind of type it out a sec. Also, again, get myself some coffee. Not to put you on the spot or anything, because I think I might know where you're going, but I don't want to presume. Gotta love this. Gotta love this Aldi coffee. I really gotta get a chance to get this camera work again, because I was going to get the cat on screen today, but that will have to wait until either Friday or next week when we figure out what the heck is going on with it. Oh, Facebook in response to fake ads, for instance, making it harder. Yeah, okay, so some platforms, definitely. A little off topic, but I was wondering if the short assignments are still in function and which topic would be the one due on Friday. Excellent. No, that's an excellent question. Did an internship with a digital marketing firm. Okay. I'm going to address the writing assignment real quick before dog is better than cat. Aw. I've had the cat longer. Short writing assignments are still in function. We got to go back to the thing I mentioned earlier about about whether or not... Oh, sorry, guys. It's lack of sleep. Writing things are still in effect. TLDR, the grading will probably be a little bit easier on these because of just acknowledging how difficult this transition is. Dog is better than cat. Thank you, Haley. Dog is equal to cat. Catto as well. We can all have some love. Dogs in general are greater than Catto and Doggo. Thank you. Yes, Catto and Doggo. We have Catto and Doggo. We can have both. But the short writing assignments are on. The grading will probably be a little bit more lax. It doesn't mean like it's going to be all the way lax, you're like automatically guaranteed an A. But whereas before, if you hit every single point in the prompt and if you hit every single point in the prompt, you were guaranteed like an 85 at lowest. Now you're basically guaranteed like a 92, right? So there will be some positive boost and adjustment to that. So the one that would be due this week would be the one that is on identity and political identity. This one might actually also be a little bit more lenient in terms of the grading in general because of just how difficult it was to talk about identity. But I also know that some people planned their writing responses around the idea of more opportunities to happening later in the semester. So I want to make sure that those people who were allocating their time to later stuff, that they still have the opportunity to submit all the assignments that day that they want to. So it'll be on identity, the identity question this upcoming Friday. Next one will be on the stuff that we're talking about today and on Friday. Great question. And then in terms of Chandler did an internship with a digital marketing firm for campaigns. Yeah, so Facebook and some places are making it more difficult, but it's still possible to micro-target. You might not be able to get as fine-grained detail using social media data, or at least not like platforms, like Facebook, that are just so ubiquitous. But we still have like massive linkage of voter turnout data to like consumer preference data to like other things like that. And we know from other studies that you can data mine those consumer preferences. How do you feel right now in this weird time period we're having classes and all reality is online, and the fact that we even have the ability to go online? Personally, I am feeling very blessed that people are safe, right? I know this is a lot of difficulty. I'm glad to see so many professors take so much care to try to make this as good as they can for their students. I'm also a little frustrated at those who don't. But it's a weird time, like you said. It's weird to be holding classes. It's weird to be pretending that everything is fine, while obviously things aren't at all fine. Well, it's not that they aren't at all fine, but they are definitely far, far, far less fine than they were before. But I'm trying to think optimistically, and I'm feeling grateful that you guys are doing well. I'm feeling grateful that that people I care about are safe, and I'm hopeful that will remain to be the case. And I'm just we're just gonna keep trying our best. And talking a little earlier about the helpers and like that. That's kind of just what I'm feeling right now. Is that's kind of what I'm just trying to aspire to be, and I hope that all of us are a little bit. That we have to recognize that this is a difficult time for a lot of people. So we will survive, hopefully. I feel like a vampire, and it's been like 3 days. That's another thing. Introverts, right? We don't feel as upset about this because really this is kind of an extended thing that we do normally, like stay in our houses, watch a lot of Netflix, just relax, other things like that. Be kind and to your extrovert friends. Remember that your extrovert friends are the ones who like help you go out, that they keep you in mind, like, hey, you want to come outside and reestablish connections with the outside world. Extroverted friends are kind of suffering, so like email them, message them, take them out to like a Skype coffee or something like that. Like keep them in mind. Be good to your friends. Be good to each other. Get some Bill and Ted. Party on, dudes. Lucky for you, get a little more time with your daughter. Win-win for you. Yes, that is a silver lining out of all of this, is I get more time with Rosalina. Me consoling my entire extrovert family. That's what I'm saying. It's you guys are gonna have a lot. You guys have a lot more commitments than just POS 3204. So, yeah. Including consoling your entire extroverted family. Wait, I missed your question, Kara. I did. This one is partisanship and identity. I'm sorry, I missed it. Is partisanship and identity similar to race and gender? Yes, that one. Will I be uploading the lecture slides from last week on Monday? Yes, I will be. I'm sorry, I got your email. I've just been swamped with baby. I'll be uploading that right after I finish the stream now, so I don't forget and mess things up with that. Okay. Yeah, this is awful. It's definitely suboptimal, 100%. Yeah, but I have faith, guys, that we're gonna pull through. That's again, and I'm trying to remain on the more optimistic end. So to wrap this up real quick, so we know that they're effective, but it's generally less important. But I also wanted to talk about that again because there's a 2-part game where it's turnout and inspiring turnout, and then it's persuading individuals. So when we talk about persuading individuals, if you remember the articles and things like that, they're talking about like 2 percentage point differences. We're talking about like 3 to 4%. We're not talking about a lot. Can I resend the attendance? It's not showing up for you for some reason. Yeah, let me put that into the chat real quick. I'm gonna put it into the chat, and then I'm also gonna put it onto Canvas on the Canvas link to this. But let me just put that into the chat real quick as I wrap this up. We talk about it's only 2 points. We talk about that it's only, not all that much in terms of the absolute effect. And that's 100% true that it's not all that much in terms of the absolute effect. But in close elections, 4 points wins you the game, right? 2 points can win you the game. And a lot of elections are very, very close, especially in today's very polarized environment. So people are going to say that campaigns don't matter, but it's also kind of interesting because they also just talk about like individual things that campaigns do, like sending out mailers and other things like that, but they don't talk about the other things that campaigns do, which is like set the tone that the press will be talking about, like set the issues or try to set the issues as best they can and frame the issues as best they can that are being set for people to be considering. So they can't necessarily change minds as much, but they can emphasize which things are important or less important and try to change the rhetorics around those things. So in that sense, that sort of stuff is also part of campaigning, but we have far less research about that. All right, so I now got the link. It took a little bit. Resending the link right there. Okay, cool. All right, so that's all I have. I'm sorry I went a little over. Again, streaming, we'll be ironing this out. Thank you guys for popping in and for coming to class. I'll be putting this up onto Canvas pretty soon. So again, thank you guys. Stay safe out there, and I will be seeing you guys on Friday. If you have any additional questions, any additional anythings, just feel free to email me. And also email